Now let's do the practical of Amazon SQS. So we would be creating the Amazon SQS queue and we would be accessing the queue from AWS SDK. So the AWS SDK helps to communicate with AWS services using our programming language. So for example, if we have Node.js, so the AWS SDK has the support of Node.js and we can communicate to our AWS services using AWS SDK for Node.js. So we would be first creating the service. So we would be going into simple queuing service and then we would be creating the queue. So we have the option of standard queue versus FIFO queue. So we are creating for now the standard queue. For example, standard order queue. So this is for our orders, for example. And we have different kinds of setting over here, like the visibility timeout. So if a consumer is consuming a message, meanwhile the message would remain invisible for other consumers so that the other consumers would not be consuming that same message. So this is the visibility timeout. Then we have the message retention period, that how much time the message would remain in the queue before it is being automatically deleted. So if for example for 4 days the message is not being consumed, then it would be automatically deleted. And then the delivery delay. So if the message is sent and if the delivery delay is set to for example 5 minutes, then the message would not be visible till 5 minutes and it would be visible after 5 minutes. So this is the delivery delay. So this is the time a message must wait in order to become visible for consumers in the queue. And this is the largest size that a queue can accept. So the maximum message size a queue can accept is, for example, by default, it is 256 KB. So the receive message wait time in Amazon SQS controls how long a consumer has to wait for the message to arrive in the queue before giving up. Like it is having the concept of pooling. So it can be the long pooling or a short pooling. So if we are setting the value 0, then it would be a short pooling. So the consumer asks the queue, like, do you have any message? The queue responds immediately, either with a message or nothing. This is the short pooling. And for the long pooling, if we have the wait time, like for example, specific time like 10 seconds. So the consumer asks the queue, do you have any message? And waits for example, 10 seconds. So before the queue responds, if a message arrives during this wait time, like 10 seconds, it would be sent to the consumer. Otherwise, after 10 seconds, it would be returned back. So this is all about the receive message wait time. Then we have the encryption and we have the access policies. So the access policies is the one that who would be accessing the Amazon SQS queue. So we can write here the access policies using JSON or we can use the basic. So this is the default policy that would be created. So the default policy is about giving the ownership to the queue owner. So the queue owner can access the queue, and in here we can see that this is the policy document in which it is mentioning the principal, the AWS account, and this is my account. So this is my account. So the account owner would be having the permission. If we want to give this queue permission to any other account or user or role, then we would be clicking here and we would be mentioning the account, the IAM user or the role. So now we are creating this queue and the queue has been created and it is giving us a URL. Now we would be going to install AWS SDK and we would be using Visual Studio Code in order to access this queue. So for this we would be creating an IAM user and we would be giving the programmatic access to that IAM user. So we would be going into IAM users. So we would be creating a new user, SQS user. So we have the option to give it console access, but we are not giving it now. So we only give this user a programmatic access and we would not be giving it the console access. We can give it, but for now we are not giving it. We are attaching a policy to this user. So because this user has to work with Amazon SQS, so we are attaching the policy having Amazon SQS full access. Then we are creating this user. Now we are opening the user and we would be going into the security credentials and we would be giving it the programmatic access. So we would be creating the keys for it. So we are selecting the local code. So we would be downloading the CSV file in order to get the access keys, or we can get the access keys from here. And this is the secret access key. We would not be sharing this secret access key with anyone because otherwise it would be controlling our access keys. So we would be showing the secret key, we would be copying it somewhere, and these access keys would be required in order to access the relevant service using AWS SDK for the services. So we have copied the key. Now let's do the coding part of AWS SDK with SQS. So this is the official documentation of AWS, and this link we can see here can give the AWS SDK for JavaScript. So we would be using the AWS SDK for JavaScript for our Amazon SQS, and from here we would be getting the code for send message and receive message so that we can get the send message and receive message programmatically. So for this we would be checking this, and let's do the coding of send message. So we would be first adding the index.js and we would be first installing the relevant client. So we would be npm install AWS SDK slash client-sqs. Then after installing, we would be doing the code in order to access the SQS client. So we would be copying the code for send message, and in here we would be using the AWS SDK client SQS, and this is the SQS client. In here we would be mentioning the AWS region. So we would be using US East 1, and we would be giving the SQS URL. So we would be going into our queue and we would be copying the URL. We would be converting it into the require because we are not currently using the modules, and we have to remove the exports, and we are calling directly from here the main method. And for now, for simplicity, we are not mentioning any message attributes or delay seconds. Now we have to set the access key and the secret key. So for this, we have to set the AWS credentials for access key and for the secret key. And we would be setting like set AWS access key ID is equals to this. And we would be setting AWS region, and then we have to set the secret. And the AWS secret key or the access key ID that we have copied from our IAM user, we would be pasting it here and would be placing enter. And we would be checking this one. And we can also check the credentials from here. Like we would be typing it here this, and we would be checking it here. So the .aws is not available here. So we can also create from here like .aws, and we can create a credentials file here. Credentials. And we would be placing the credentials here. So now we can try it. So now we can see that the message has been sent successfully with the status code 200. So the message is sent successfully, and we are refreshing it, and we can see that the message is available here. So we are going into the send and receive messages, and we can see one message here. So we can be pulling for messages. So we are pulling, and here is the message. So we can see the message here. So this is the message. And then now we would be creating a receiver. So we would be creating like for example receive messages.js, and let's name it send message. Send message.js. That would be relevant. So in the receive message, we would be doing the same. We would be getting the code of receive message, and we would be pasting it here. And now we would be giving the URL this. We would be giving the region, and we would be sending the call in order to receive the messages, and we are not using the export, but we are directly calling this method, and we are not using this import this, and we are checking the receive message. So we have received the message that we have sent, and now let's send another message. So for example, we are changing the message body and we are sending updated message as of today. So we are sending the message, and we are, so now we are only receiving the updated message because the previous message we have already received and acknowledged. So this is the second message that we are receiving here. And this is the practical of send message and receive message using AWS SDK for JavaScript. So if we are using C sharp, then we have to use the AWS SDK for C sharp. So this is the first example. We can also use the AWS SDK for other services like SNS or S3 or EC2 and many other services.